I'm sure people who have heard on the news are hoping for the same thing.
Justice for the little girl and the parents, too.
Flowers, teddy bears, Hello Kitty, the kind of things a young teenager might like.
Try to run, or if you try to resist, you will get hit with non-lethal and it's gonna hurt.
21-year-old singer David pleading not guilty to murder in the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Her body found dismembered and decomposed inside a Tesla.
On April 23, 2026, David Anthony Burke, known to millions of fans around the world as D4vd, sat in a Los Angeles courtroom in an orange jail jumpsuit. Handcuffs were removed when he took his seat. He said 2 words the entire hearing. "Yes, ma'am." That was it. 2 words in response to a procedural question from the judge. And then he sat there, quietly, while prosecutors stood up and began to describe the evidence they had assembled against him in one of the most closely watched cases in the country right now. What came out of that courtroom on April 23rd is the reason we are here today. Because of the details that prosecutors revealed, the scale of the digital evidence, the number of investigative bodies that have been working this case behind the scenes, and the specific revelations about what was found on Burke's personal phone, have shifted the public understanding of where this case stands in ways that deserve to be laid out fully and carefully. This is not a story that is winding down. It is a story that is just now, finally, moving into the room where accountability happens. Welcome to Behind the Evidence. This channel exists to go past the headline and into the full picture. If you have been following the D4vd case since the beginning, this video has everything that has come out of court in the last 2 weeks. If this is your first time hearing about this case, everything you need to understand what is happening and why it matters is right here. Subscribe now if you are not already with us, because we will be covering every development in this case as it moves toward trial. Now let's start from the beginning, because to understand where this case is today, you have to understand how we got here. Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez was born on September 7, 2010, in Lake Elsinore, California, a city in Riverside County about an hour southeast of Los Angeles. Her parents, Jesus Rivas and Mercedes Martinez, had immigrated from El Salvador and built a life in the Inland Empire. Celeste was their daughter. She had a brother. She had a sister. She had neighbors who knew her face and friends who knew her laugh. A neighbor who later built a makeshift memorial outside the family home, filling it with flowers, candles, and stuffed animals, said something that has stayed with everyone who heard it. She said she did not want Celeste remembered as a rebellious kid or a runaway. She said Celeste was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She said she was a young girl just trying to figure out life. And she said she doesn't get to grow up. Celeste loved Hello Kitty. The missing persons poster that her family distributed across Lake Elsinore said she was last seen wearing Hello Kitty slippers. She was in the 7th grade. She was 13 years old when the person prosecutors say groomed and targeted her first made contact with her world. And she was 14 years old when, according to prosecutors, she was killed. That is who this case is about. Not the singer, not the music career, not the album, the tour, or the industry fallout. This case is about a 14-year-old girl in Hello Kitty slippers who loved to sing and dance and who, according to her family's attorney, always told her family that she loved them. That is where this story begins, and that is where it has to remain anchored, no matter how many other details surround it. David Anthony Burke was born on March 28, 2005. He grew up in Houston, Texas. He was homeschooled as a teenager, which meant his world was largely online, built through the internet connections and gaming communities that define so many young people's social lives in the digital era. He began making music in 2021 for gaming video montages. In 2022, he uploaded a song called Romantic Homicide to streaming platforms and TikTok. The song went viral with a speed that caught the music industry off guard. He recorded it on equipment that cost almost nothing. The sound was raw and emotionally immediate in the way that resonates with audiences who are tired of overproduced pop. Within months, he had signed with Darkroom and Interscope Records, two of the most powerful labels in the music industry. Within a year, he had millions of followers, platinum certifications, and a trajectory that most musicians spend their entire careers chasing. He was 17 years old when Romantic Homicide went viral. He was, to his fanbase, one of the most relatable and authentic young artists in the world. He made music in his room. He talked to his fans online. He built his community the way the internet generation builds everything, through proximity and access, and the deliberate cultivation of closeness between an artist and the people who love his work. And that closeness, prosecutors allege, is exactly how Celeste Rivas Hernandez entered his orbit. According to investigators, Celeste was a member of Burke's official Discord server, a platform where fans gather to discuss an artist's music, share content, and interact with each other, and sometimes the artist directly. Evidence shows she was present on that server as early as 2022. She was 11 or 12 years old. Other users in the server, according to investigators, referred to her at the time as Burke's girlfriend. That detail is not a minor footnote. It is a foundational piece of what prosecutors are presenting as a pattern of behavior that began years before anyone outside that server had any reason to know Celeste Rivas Hernandez's name. Celeste's mother told investigators her daughter had a boyfriend named David. The two were photographed together. They had matching tattoos. Her brother told a local television station that Celeste went missing after Burke picked her up in his car. The connection between them was not hidden, not secret in the way that things are secret when someone understands they are doing something wrong and takes deliberate steps to conceal it. It was visible enough that the people closest to Celeste knew. It was visible enough that photographs existed. It was visible enough that matching tattoos existed. And it was visible enough that when Celeste started disappearing, the people around her had a name. The problem was that having a name and being able to do something with that name are two entirely different things. And for a very long time, the distance between those two things was the distance between Celeste being alive and Celeste being found in the trunk of an abandoned car. Between February and April 2024, Celeste was reported missing 3 times. 3 separate missing person reports were filed with the Riverside County Sheriff's Office. 3 separate moments when her family stood in front of law enforcement and said their daughter was gone and they were afraid. The 3rd and final report was filed on April 5, 2024, and yet Celeste remained alive for more than a year after that final report. Surveillance footage and digital evidence confirmed she was alive as late as September 2024. She was photographed backstage at one of Burke's Los Angeles concerts in June 2024. She was alive in January 2025. Whatever her circumstances were during those months, wherever she was staying and under what conditions, investigators have confirmed she was still alive. Still reachable, in theory, by a system that had been formally notified 3 times that she was missing. That gap, the distance between 3 missing person reports and a 14-year-old girl in the trunk of a car, is one of the most important questions this case raises. Not because it points toward simple blame or easy answers, but because it points toward a systemic pattern that advocates for missing children have documented for years. Young girls, particularly young girls from communities without significant resources or visibility, who are reported missing and who are known to be connected to older individuals with means, do not always receive the sustained, resourced response that the urgency of their situation demands. Celeste's family was not quiet. They were not passive. They filed reports. They made pleas. They distributed flyers. They did what families are told to do when someone they love disappears. And still, for more than a year, Celeste remained out of reach of everyone who might have brought her home safely. Prosecutors allege that during part of that period, Burke was engaged in an ongoing pattern of conduct toward Celeste that prosecutors say began when she was 13 years old and continued through September 2024. The criminal complaint specifies that this occurred while Burke resided with and had recurring access to her, and that Celeste had become a witness to other alleged conduct by Burke during that time. Both of those specifications matter enormously to the legal architecture of this case, and we will return to them when we get to the charges. On April 23, 2025, exactly 1 year before Burke appeared in court for his hearing last week, Celeste Rivas Hernandez went to Burke's rental home in the Hollywood Hills. Prosecutors say she arrived that night and issued what amounted to an ultimatum. She told Burke she intended to expose what had been happening. She told him she was going to reveal his conduct. And according to the Los Angeles County District Attorney, David Burke killed her that night to prevent her from doing exactly that. 2 days later, his debut studio album Withered was released. It debuted at number 13 on the Billboard 200. He performed shows. He gave interviews. He continued the public-facing life of a rising music star while, according to prosecutors, Celeste Rivas Hernandez lay dead inside his Hollywood Hills rental. Prosecutors allege that approximately 2 weeks after her death, Burke concealed her remains in bags and placed them in the vehicle. The car they were placed in, a black Tesla registered to Burke, was parked on Bluebird Avenue in the Hollywood Hills. It sat there. Weeks passed. On September 3, 2025, the vehicle was cited for violating the 72-hour parking ordinance and towed to the Hollywood tow yard. 2 days later, on September 5, it arrived at the impound lot. 3 days after that, on September 8, 2025, a tow yard worker noticed an odor coming from the vehicle and alerted police. Officers responded. They opened the front trunk. Inside, in black bags, they found the remains of a young girl in an advanced state of decomposition. It was September 8, 2025, the day after what would have been Celeste Rivas Hernandez's 15th birthday. Investigators did not immediately make a public identification. The condition of the remains made forensic examination enormously difficult. An initial autopsy was performed on September 10th. It took until December 9, 2025, for the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner to formally determine the cause and manner of death, and even that determination was placed under a court-ordered secrecy hold at the request of law enforcement. The hold was unusual. Legal analysts who commented on it publicly noted that such holds are typically requested when releasing information could compromise an ongoing investigation, suggesting that as early as December 2025, investigators were building something significant. Burke was publicly named as a suspect in November 2025. His attorney at that point was already Blair Burke, one of the most prominent celebrity defense lawyers in the country, known for representing major public figures in high-stakes criminal matters. The involvement of Burke at that stage of the investigation, before any charges were filed, told experienced legal observers something important about how seriously Burke and his team were taking the situation. In late February 2026, court documents filed in Texas revealed the existence of a grand jury investigation. Burke's parents and younger brother had been subpoenaed to testify before a Los Angeles grand jury and had filed petitions in Texas attempting to avoid that testimony. The documents attached to those petitions confirmed that the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office believed Burke may be involved in foul play connected to Rivas's death. The existence of the grand jury and the fact that Burke's own family members were being subpoenaed told the public that the investigation was far further along than the relative silence from law enforcement had suggested. On April 16, 2026, 12 days ago, David Anthony Burke was arrested by the LAPD at a home on Marmont Avenue in Los Angeles. He was taken into custody on suspicion of murder. He was held without bail. 4 days later, on April 20th, the Los Angeles District Attorney Nathan Hotchman stood at a podium and formally announced the charges. First-degree murder. 2 additional charges connected to what prosecutors allege he did to Celeste while she was a minor, and to what prosecutors allege was done to her remains. 3 charges. And attached to the murder charge are three special circumstances that transform it from a serious felony into something that carries the possibility of life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. Those special circumstances were lying in wait, committing the murder for financial gain, and murdering a witness to a crime. Each of those three circumstances tells a specific part of the prosecution's theory of what happened on April 23, 2025. Lying in wait suggests that when Celeste arrived at Burke's home that night, he was not in a state of uncontrolled emotion. He was prepared. He had positioned himself in a way that gave her no chance to defend herself or escape. Financial gain points to what prosecutors say was Burke's primary motive, which was the protection of his music career. District Attorney Hodgman said it directly at the press conference. He said Burke killed Celeste to maintain his very lucrative musical career, which she was threatening. 2 days before a debut album release, with a world tour booked and an industry infrastructure built around the next 12 months of his professional life, prosecutors allege that Burke made a calculation. And murdering a witness refers to the specific legal reality that Celeste, as someone who could testify about what she knew and what she had experienced, was a potential witness in an ongoing investigation. Prosecutors allege that killing her was an attempt to eliminate that testimony permanently. Burke pleaded not guilty to all charges at his arraignment on April 20th. His attorneys issued a statement saying the actual evidence would show that David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez and was not the cause of her death. They said they would vigorously defend his innocence. His defense team includes Blair Burke and Marilyn Bednarski, both experienced in high-profile criminal defense. They immediately invoked Burke's right under California law to have a preliminary evidentiary hearing within 10 court days of arraignment, an unusual and strategically significant move that signaled the defense wants the prosecution's evidence on the table and visible as quickly as possible. Which brings us to April 23, 2026, the hearing that happened last week, and the details that came out of that courtroom are the reason this video exists. April 23 was initially scheduled as a preliminary hearing, the proceeding in which prosecutors present their evidence to a judge who determines whether there is sufficient basis to move the case to trial. Instead, the session became a status conference, a procedural check-in that set the timeline for what comes next, but it was not without substance. What prosecutors revealed in that courtroom, even in a procedural context, was significant enough to reshape the public understanding of the evidence landscape in this case. Deputy District Attorney Bates Silverman addressed the court and described the scope of the digital evidence investigators have gathered. The number she gave was 40 terabytes. 40 terabytes of digital data were recovered from Burke's devices and accounts through the course of the investigation. To put that in context, 40 terabytes is an almost incomprehensible volume of digital information. It represents months of investigative work to collect, process, and analyze. It includes the contents of phones, cloud accounts, and data obtained through multiple search warrants served across multiple platforms and jurisdictions. It includes, according to Silverman, witness testimony gathered before 3 separate grand juries whose existence she confirmed publicly for the first time at that hearing. 3 grand juries, not one. 3 separate investigative bodies were convened, which heard evidence and were part of the process that led to Burke's arrest. And then Silverman told the court something else, something that made the already serious nature of this case significantly heavier. She told the judge that among the evidence recovered from Burke's iPhone was deeply disturbing material that prosecutors described as directly relevant to the charges he faces. The prosecution did not elaborate in open court. The statement itself, made by a prosecutor in a formal court proceeding, is now part of the official record of this case. The defense, for its part, pushed for the preliminary hearing to proceed as quickly as possible. Burke said in court that with all the secret evidence gathered in the case, they simply want it seen. Legal analysts who covered the hearing noted that this is an unusual defense strategy, one that suggests either significant confidence in Burke's innocence or a calculated decision that moving quickly serves the defense's interests in ways that are not yet fully visible from the outside. The preliminary hearing was scheduled to begin on May 1st, 2026, 4 days from now, though both sides acknowledge the date could shift if more preparation time is needed. On April 22nd, 1 day before that hearing, the autopsy report was unsealed. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner had completed the autopsy in December 2025 and sealed it under the secrecy hold law enforcement had requested. When it was finally released, the document revealed that Celeste Rivas Hernandez died as a result of 2 penetrating wounds to her torso. 1 wound to her right abdomen had penetrated her liver. A second wound was to her left chest. The medical examiner ruled the manner of death a homicide. The report also noted that the condition of Celeste's body, which was in an advanced state of decomposition, made the full examination extremely difficult. Her body weighed 71 pounds when it was found. Presumptive positives for benzodiazepines and methamphetamine were noted in the toxicological findings, details that the defense may address in their own presentation of events. The family of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, through their attorney Patrick Steinfeld, described the autopsy findings as absolutely devastating. They said the findings had caused profound emotional pain. They asked for privacy and patience as they processed the information. Her parents, Jesus and Mercedes, did not attend the April 23rd hearing. They have largely stayed out of the public eye since their daughter's remains were identified, choosing to grieve privately while their attorney speaks on their behalf. In a statement, the family said Celeste was a beautiful, strong girl who loved to sing and dance. They said they love her very much and that she always told them she loved them. And they said all they want is justice for Celeste. The industry fallout that followed Burke's arrest has been swift and complete. YouTube demonetized and suspended his account. Interscope Records ended its relationship with him. Universal Music Group assisted artists who had collaborated with Burke in removing those collaborations from streaming platforms. Epic Games, which had featured his music inside the game Fortnite, issued refunds to players who had purchased in-game items associated with his music. A planned deluxe edition of his album was shelved. His world tour, which had already been suspended following the discovery of Celeste's remains in September 2025, was canceled in full. The infrastructure of a music career that prosecutors say he killed to protect has been dismantled without a trial, without a conviction, entirely through the weight of public knowledge about what he is charged with. There is a detail in this case that has not received the attention it deserves in most of the coverage. It is a moment captured in the same Discord server where Celeste was known to be a member. In August 2024, 4 months after Celeste's third and final missing person report, 4 months after her family was actively searching for her, Burke posted in that server that he was in a song crisis. An anonymous user responded to that message. They wrote, "Drop the one with the missing girl, Celeste Rivas Hernandez." Burke did not reply. He did not acknowledge the message. He simply did not respond, and the server moved on. The missing girl, named by name, in the singer's own fan server, and nothing changed. That moment sits inside this case like a splinter, impossible to ignore and impossible to remove, because it means that within the very community Burke had built and cultivated, there were people who knew. People who had connected the dots between the name of a missing 14-year-old from Lake Elsinore and the man running the server they were all sitting in. And the man at the center of that community saw the message. And he said nothing. And Celeste Rivas Hernandez was still alive at that point. She was confirmed alive through digital and surveillance evidence as late as September 2024 and January 2025, which means there was still time. There was still a window, however narrow, in which a different response to that message, a different level of investigative pressure on the connection between Burke and Celeste, a different outcome to any of those 3 missing person reports might have changed what happened on April 23, 2025. That window is closed now, And what remains is a courtroom in Los Angeles, 40 terabytes of evidence, a preliminary hearing scheduled for May 1st, and a family in Lake Elsinore trying to hold themselves together long enough to see justice delivered for a 7th-grade girl in Hello Kitty slippers who should be 15 years old and thinking about high school and the rest of her life. Burke remains in custody without bail. The preliminary hearing on May 1st will determine whether a judge finds sufficient cause to move the case to trial. Given the volume of evidence described by prosecutors and the 3 grand juries that have already heard portions of that evidence, legal analysts widely expect the case to advance. If it does, and if Burke is ultimately convicted of first-degree murder with the special circumstances attached to his charges, he faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. The district attorney's office has not yet decided whether to seek the death penalty. That decision will come later in the process. The defense maintains Burke is innocent. They say the evidence will prove it. In California, the defendant has the right to a fair trial, the right to confront the evidence against them, and the right to have that evidence tested in open court. That process is what is beginning now. And it is a process that, whatever its outcome, will force a full public accounting of what happened between a young music artist and a 13-year-old girl from Lake Elsinore who found her way into his Discord server and never found her way back home. Behind the evidence will be here for every development, every hearing, every piece of evidence that enters the public record, every moment that moves this case closer to the truth that Celeste Rivas Hernandez's family has been waiting for since the moment they filed the first of 3 missing person reports and hoped someone would listen. If this video reached you and you are hearing this story for the first time, please share it. Not for numbers, for Celeste, for the people who love her and need the world to know that she was more than a headline and more than a case number. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend who loved Hello Kitty and wanted to grow up. She deserved the chance to do exactly that. Subscribe to Behind the Evidence. The preliminary hearing begins on May 1st. We will be back.